Hello, everybody. Is this on? Can you hear? Yes? Can you hear me now? Okay, good. I like to walk around a little bit as I speak, so this is perfect. I'm a New Yorker. I talk with my hands and I walk, so bear with me. So my name is Masha Turchinsky. I'm from the Metropolitan Museum of Art. I am a senior producer in digital there. In my role at the museum, I produce original content series for the museum and online features and as well as technology in the galleries. But this year, we launched a special project called MetKids, and so I was going to dedicate my time today to talk about that and think about why young people's voices matter. And I know that for a lot of you, you might not specifically have an interest in your focus of your job may not be children, but what I'd like to do today is talk about the background of this project, how it came to be, what we learned from it, and also I think a lot of lessons that we learned from this project can be applied to the work that we all do in museums. So I will start with this, because this really gets to the heart of the work that we did with MetKids. So I'd like to just, not that I can promise to answer it, but I would like to know if we have maybe one or two brave people today who will tell me, if you could ask a question to the Met right now, what question would that be? And again, I cannot promise I can answer it, but I want to know what is one question, or a few brave people who would raise their hand and tell me a question that they have for the Metropolitan. Great question! That is actually one of the most common questions that we have, as you can imagine. Great, and that's, anybody else? What's another kind of question that you might have for the Met? How many people work there? That one I can answer, about 2,500. Okay, so we really wanted to know what kids thought about, wanted to know about the Met. What could the museum be for kids? And we didn't want to do this in a vacuum, and we didn't want to do this just by thinking about what we thought the museum should be. I really wanted to ask them what they thought the Met should be for them, and especially what should a digital space be for kids. And the only way to do that, we realized, was to bring the kids in and talk to them. So I would like to show you a quick summary of the project. And I hope there's sound. No? Should I pause? Okay, hold on, I'll go back. It's not a digital conference if you don't have one digital issue. We can fix that. So, so while we're waiting, is there anything else? Is anyone else now brave enough to ask a question of the Met, or any museum, the place that you work? What are some questions that you think young people would like to ask in your museum? How many works are exhibited, right? And what you said, so what we're talking about is the very practical.
I wonder how
here we
the
go.
instruments sound and how the museum got them.
How do those art? I want to find out.
How do you take care of objects without damaging them?
I was wondering what the hieroglyphics on this temple mean.
So what I'd like to do also is, just so you know that the app is actually coming soon, but I would like to say that, and make mention of the fact that MetKids is supported, very generously supported by Bloomberg Philanthropies, and it's one of the Bloomberg Connects projects, so this is how this has been possible. So I want to tell you a little bit about the goals for the project, and again, I think it's something that will tell you about the behind the scenes of the MetKids project, but perhaps will give you some ideas and maybe begin a conversation for after about what we could all be thinking about in our work. So three of the top goals: agency, scaffolding, and an artful experience. So it needed to be, the project I knew had to be a place that was made for, with, and by kids. Because so often, and in the past, the Metropolitan had wonderful resources for children. We've got wonderful in-gallery programs, and we have wonderful library programs and studio programs, and we have, but when we spoke to children online, it was always through the veil of talking to their parent or their teacher first. It was always telling the parent, you went to the kids page and it was always telling the parent what time to drop the kid off at the class, or what time how to bring your school group, but there wasn't really a strong place to talk to a kid on their own terms. So that was really important. It needed to be scaffolded. The Met, a few of you have said to me today, oh, I was at the Met, I only saw this much. I've been working there now for a long time. I feel the same way. It takes a long time to see the Met. And it's really important that kids especially, but everyone, have a very good first experience, because it will help guarantee that they will come back. So you need to find a way to hold their hand and get them comfortable before you let them go. So it's how do you make a really big place small and manageable, at least for that moment. And it had to be an artful experience, and that is because of the mission of the Metropolitan is it's an art institution, and I think we all have to be true to the nature of our own institutions, and in the case of the museum, we are not a commercial entity, we are not Nickelodeon, we are not Disney, it had to come back to the art. So I'll tell you about the process. We had we were very lucky to be able to have the time to do a long, complex research and development process in which kids were involved at every single stage. They were involved in the initial planning, the co-creation. They were involved in the design. They were involved in the user experience. And then we brought them back even after launch to do play testing and continue to improve. And I think in a lot of ways, MetKids is kind of like a kid in that you don't just have a kid and you just stop caring. MetKids will just keep growing. And so it's important for us to keep testing and keep modifying and always evolve with these children. The advisory groups were kids, as well as curators and educators. And that's because we want to give the kids agency, but we also want them to be able to discover things, and so they wanted access to specialists, so they didn't want to be completely on their own at the Met. They really did they cared about meeting the people who really knew a lot about the museum and the art. And it also, we needed alignment. So it needed to align with the Met's mission. The Met has, for example, an educational mission, and it also needs to align with the programs. So MetKids was not designed to create a whole new program that was so different from everything else the Met was doing. It just needs to be the digital representation or manifestation of a lot of the values that we have in the museum about learning, about art, and about the importance of the objects that we have in our collection. And finally, we had alignment with, to make it valuable to people in addition to kids, because primary target audience is kids, but we wanted to make it also accessible, useful to those who work with kids. And so in our case, in New York City, we have a blueprint for the visual arts that educators use, which tells you when kids are learning things in the spring, in the summer, what age they are, to help us understand, well, what would be really helpful for kids to know? And then what was fun is that they would come in, we gave them titles of respect, so they were our MetKids advisors, and then you could see that their parents were very excited they were MetKids advisors, and they would do some work and tweet it out for us. So who are MetKids? So MetKids is targeted at 7 to 12-year-olds. And so we do a lot of programs for younger kids, but for this digital space, the focus was 7 to 12 years old, and not the toddlers and not the 13-year-olds, and that aligns again with the Met's programming, and it also is, in terms of cognitive development, it's a good time to think about kids acting independently in the digital space. They came from, we invited them in, and I will talk to you about how we got these kids in, but they came from New York City. They came from around the United States, and we also got them to come. They came in from 7 countries and 5 continents. And the Met is lucky because we do get a lot of international tourism. In fact, 1/3 of our visitation is international. And what's really fun is if you want to know how you get kids, is you have to be available to work with a research, we worked with a research development team, but also you have to be available when kids are able to come to your museum. And that means holidays, and that means Saturdays and Sundays, and it means early in the morning or maybe after school. And every time we would position ourselves to do research, and as someone walked in the door, and I would say, our team would say, would you help the Met build a website for kids? Overwhelmingly, people said, absolutely. And what was really funny for us was the difference between Americans maybe and even Europeans. The American parents might want to know, oh, do we stand right here nearby? Do we watch them for 40 minutes? And the European parents were like, oh, hey, here, yeah, take them on. And they would, bye. And so not so much helicopter parenting, and so that was really fun. That was great. I was like, you can come back and get them. But the important thing was they were first-timers, first-time visitors. They were sometimes met regular kids from around the city, and then a lot of kids who were coming in from other parts of the country. It was also really great to have them in focus groups. It was actually quite special to witness kids who spoke all different languages from 7 to 12, finding a way to communicate. And it gives you a lot of hope in this world, but everybody using the language that they knew. There were kids from Abu Dhabi in with kids from Kansas City and London, everyone making it work. So there's hope in that sense. And the most important thing was that MetKids is all real kids. There are no actors, and I know that you have to make choices. There's a choice you make when you work with professional children in the videos that we'll see in a moment. But for us, it had to be real kids, and it was all based on their real questions for the Metropolitan. So no actors, just kids who could walk in the door or write us and ask us a real question. And so this is just a quick look at who they are. They come with a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of interest. And actually, for some people who think that kids don't want to be in museums or they're jaded, I think you just have to give them a chance. They have so many questions, and if you give them something to do, they take advantage of it. They will stay a long time if you let them. And then you start to get to know them a little better, and then you start to know their names. And so here we have Jason and Nora and Nestor. So what's really exciting when you get to do research and development and meet children at all different stages of the project is you get to have quantitative data and qualitative data. And I enjoyed what kids would say to me verbatim. They would say, it's cool to look at a big map of the museum, and I really like the time machine, and I want to make a time machine when I get older. Children know how to talk to children, so this is what kids would tell us. I thought it was really interesting that they were so much less interested than adults in wayfinding. They were okay being a little lost. The adults, everybody talks about, oh, this museum needs a better map, but the kids were very interested, and they do think about the Met. It became evident that they thought about the Met as a big time machine. If you walk a few paces like this, you're in Rome. Not Roman galleries, but for kids, it's Rome. You're in Rome. And then you walk over here, and now you're in Africa. And they are fine with that. And that's pretty great that they're very open to that. And it was so cool. They loved seeing a kid with the microphone being in charge and holding their own with a curator or a specialist. So as we started to think about what is this they like, they would tell us, oh, they also love comics and illustrations and maps, and they love details. So we worked with an artist named John Kirschbaum, who is an illustrator in New York, and he took about 3.5 years to draw the museum, every single gallery. And it became sort of an interactive map, which you can click around. As we went through, we realized we were going to redo all of the labels that kids would tell us as they walked through the museum, that those labels on the wall didn't speak to them. They didn't understand them. And how many of you have walked in a room and seen a label that it just didn't help you at all understand what you were looking at, right? We've all witnessed this, right? So one of the things they told us, if we were going to redo the labels and they were going to help us rewrite these labels, was that they needed one thing. Tell me one thing that would make me care about this object. The thing that makes me stop. And this is, I bet we've all seen this at our museums. This, the glaze, especially when you're on vacation or tourist. This is what you see, right? This look. Looking at painting, just like this, not stopping. Right? Or maybe this. Just a little bit, that 7-second shuffle. So something to stop and make me care. And so they said a fun fact was not just a little thing, but so important to them. And so every object, as we rewrote the labels, has to have a fun fact. And they told us, and we had them review them. And if they weren't fun, we had to go back and get something more fun. So this is a bed and that is in the English decorative art galleries. And the fun fact is that at night, the curtains would close because the people who owned the bed believed that the air was toxic in the evening. And so they said, oh, okay, that's good. That's a good fact. Actually, a really good one, because we're in Romania. I learned one fun fact from the curator in Modern and Contemporary was Constantine Brancusi, when we brought Bird in Space, when the Metropolitan Curator brought that in for the first time to the museum, the American custom agent did not accept that it was art, did not believe it was art, and so it came in as a kitchen appliance. It had to be, and that's how it came in. And now I'm very happy that it came in that way. So it had to be really good, and it had to be like the fact had to be like, psst, pass it on. This is a really cool thing to know. So as you go around this interactive map, you can click the different points. Now we add new content every month. So you click a dot and it takes you to an object. So let's say The Little Dancer by Edgar Degas. And now the label is a non-linear label. So you can click these categories in any fashion you want. So you don't have to read it in order. And in fact, you don't have to click every one of them. If you want to experience this only by doing listen, or only by watch, that's totally fine. Maybe the next time you come, you will look at the creates or the discovers. We've rewritten all the labels, and one thing that we learned from children was, instead of telling them, click here to know more or read more, kids said, no, don't tell us to read more. Maybe I don't want to read. Ask me if I want to know more. So we changed the wording, and now it's want to know more, and if they want to, they can go down deeper. We included a glossary because it's not fair to kids to assume that they know what the Paris Opera is. It's not fair, actually, to assume that anyone knows a lot of these terms in museums. I think we make a lot of assumptions about what people know when you read about these objects. So we let them know if they want to click it. And it goes on. And so we add new content every month. We keep dropping pins to get kids back. When we asked kids about what they thought about the museum, it was so interesting. They said over and over, it feels like a time machine. And so I said, okay, well, if the Met is a time machine, what does a Met time machine look like? And so they would come in during our research sessions, and they would draw a Met time machine. And that is what would happen. That's how a Met time machine lets you go from Rome to Africa, to the Islamic world, right? That can happen. So we said, well, if that's how they think about the Met, then why don't let's go with that. Let's work with this. So these are the drawings. And then we start to sketch, and we learned some really interesting things. So we started to see, okay, time periods and geography. We asked them, what are some big ideas that they want? These were the top big ideas that kids from all our research around the galleries and in the sessions would talk about: inventions, gods and heroes, secrets. Here's a really fun, interesting thing that time periods. So kids know, they have a general sense of time, and of course, kids in every country know certain dates. So in the United States, 1776 is a big day because that's a year. That's a big year of our independence. French children all know 1789. It goes on and on, right? But they can't tell you other than that. If you talk to an 8 or a 9-year-old and you say, well, are you interested in the ancient world? Yes. When is the ancient world? They're not quite sure. So one kid, actually a 10-year-old boy, said that if he were interested in going to the ancient world, he would, and he had to enter the number in an open box. He said, well, I would probably go to the ancient world, maybe something like 1980? And so we never invited him back. But so what we learned is you have to give them the times. They can recognize ancient world. Let them pick it, but don't expect them to type in an open box a year. It's not fair. They don't know those times yet. Let them recognize them. And then here's the final one. So we took their actual illustrations and we gave them to the illustrator to say, okay, do something with these. So in the end, give them what they want. They want the time machine. Make it one of the primary channels, the map, the time machine, and videos. The time machine, let them decide whichever order they want to do this, and let them do it as many times as they want. If they just want to go to the time machine over and over, I would be delighted. They also thought it would be really fun, and they suggested if there's a button that says, don't touch or else. Because you know in the museum, you walk in the museum, and it's like, as soon as you walk in, look with your eyes, don't touch, don't touch, don't touch. Well, so they said, well, wouldn't it be fun if we had a button that said, don't touch? And I said, well, what would you do? They said, we'd touch it. So, okay. So we gave them that. So there's something fun. I won't tell you what it is, but if you visit MetKids, you can go to this don't touch button. So kids, I think one of the things that I learned a lot through the project, and this is your audience. They are your little audience. They're not your audience of the future. They're your audience of right now. They are smart and they are fun and they are curious. And so don't be afraid in your projects to be smart and fun and curious, because that's how they see themselves. And we should meet them on that ground. Another thing that I got to witness firsthand was how seriously kids will take a job if you give them that job of responsibility. So you give them a mic and you say, in this case, to these two young girls, you're going to interview a visiting artist from China, from Beijing. Luckily, these two girls have been studying Chinese since they were 3 years old, so they surprised the artist. I think they surprised all of us. And they did a wonderful interview. And basically what I want to say is, know that if you give them this role, they don't goof around. They actually take it seriously. If you tell them this is a serious job, they will do a fabulous interview. So watch them rise to the challenge. And now I'd like to show you a video of an example of a young kid who does one such interview.
Hi, I'm Xavier. I'm 11 years old. I am from Manhattan. We're here in the Conservation Lab of Arms and Armor.
Hi, my name's Ted. I'm the conservator for the Department of Arms and Armor at the Metropolitan Museum of Art.
How long does armors last?
It depends on how well taken care of it is. We have things up in the galleries right now that are 1,000 years old. A lot of that is because of conservators here in the museum, like myself, who spend a lot of time taking care of those things.
A conservator helps make armor last by preserving it.
We make sure that they're in a good environment and that they have good storage or display conditions. We keep them clean, and the more we take care of it, the longer it will last.
How do you take care of objects without damaging them?
Do you want me to show you?
Yes.
Okay, we're gonna go over to my desk.
Okay.
We have a rule here in Arms and Armor, and the rule is sneak up on the art. What do you think that means?
Sneak up means like look closely.
Exactly, very good. Look closely and go slowly. If you look here, what do we see?
Rust.
It's got some rust going on under there. One of the ways I clean things is with little tools like this. This is a scalpel, like a doctor would use, right? But I don't do surgery. I use it for scraping rust. And I'll work like this. I'm going slow. Remember I said sneak up on the art? Mm-hmm. Okay, this is how you do it. You go real slow. And I'm gonna just scrape off a little bit of this at a time.
I can see some coming
You
off.
can see it coming off. Now, if I did this too fast, I might take off too much. I might scratch it. So I go very, very slowly to take off this rust. Just this little bit here, I've been working on it a few minutes and it's still got a long way to go. I once spent 4 months on one armor It was a big mess, and it smelled bad because I had to use chemicals and things to clean off some of the old lacquers.
You have to be really careful with cleaning arms in armor.
My job is to know when to stop cleaning. My goal is not to make it look brand new. What I want to do is protect it and clean it so that it looks as an old thing. I have a question for you. Do you know of any sports that people play today that need armor?
One of the sports that I play is ice hockey, and what I wear for ice hockey, I wear a hard vest, I wear a helmet and a mouth gear.
Sounds like armor to me, man.
This is Xavier reporting from the Metropolitan Museum of Art. The end.
So the thing I wanted to point out that we do in the videos that was important is we had to take a topic. The kid had a real question about armor, so we matched his interest with a specialist, and then you make it relatable. So what is it that is about your life that relates to the work in armor? And then we always like to end the videos with, what's your MetKids question, to inspire the next one. And we hope that watching this one inspires the next kid to say, my question is not so silly after all. When we deal with, every year, in the summer, I run a lab, an intensive lab that's based on digital skills. And this is an opportunity for us, especially from a digital producer perspective, to kind of unleash and witness how kids use new tools to create new understanding about art, but it also is selfishly a way that we can scale their work and share their work, so that a studio program that takes place in the museum for 5 days doesn't just have to stay with those 20 kids. It's the way that we can then share it helps us see what they're doing, right? It's a lens for us to see how they see the art. And so I'll show you a really quick one. What we do in the animation labs is we bring them in and they work and learn how to use stop motion animation. Kids have told us they love being movie creators themselves. And they come in and make their own, they do their own interpretations and their own digital storytelling inspired by the work in the galleries. And in this particular case, in the example I'm going to show you, 2 boys had to randomly select an object out of a hat, and they told me later they would never have picked this painting because they don't think about themselves as kids who like ballet, but they picked it out of the hat, and their task was to imagine what would happen if they jumped into this artwork. It's very quick, but it's a... They build all the sets. There they are. So I had to laugh because they said, well, one, of course, they would go in with their guitars and they would ruin everything, and that's what they would do. But then they also said at the end, because it was a film, they put fiend, and they said, oh, well, one kid said, I know about good movies, and all good movies have the word fiend at the end. So, okay. Well, I'll tell you, fast forward, those 2 boys who said they didn't care about Edgar Degas, now at the end of the program, when they talked about their painting, they said, well, my painting is about my painting. is about this. My painting has to do with ballerinas. My video is about my painting. And so there was an ownership, there was a transfer of two boys who said they had no interest in that painting, and then they owned it. Isn't that great? They owned that painting. So now I'll tell you a little bit about what traffic. This is all good to do the research in the beginning, but I will tell you that, we do look at analytics. We are hooked up to Google Analytics. We check the traffic because children should inform us. And then in the back end, the behavior online also should tell us something. It's a digital project. We can take advantage of that. So online, kids are visiting the famous tomb of Perneb. They visit the Temple of Dendor, and they visit the Arms and Armor galleries. And that's interesting because that's what they do in the museum too. They also like to check in to the information desk, and they go to the balcony, the second floor, and they look over virtually. And then they go to a Renaissance patio, which I think is a great, unusual thing. And then when they go to the time machine, consistently mythology is our top choice. They go to the ancient world. Again, they click the 8000 BC button, and they also are interested in fashion. So there are different ways. It's a digital project, and we started strong with 3 channels. We launched with the interactive map, with videos, and with a time machine. And the other piece that we have where kids can actively contribute and participate is our MetKids blog. And so we get a lot of letters. The Met gets a lot of letters. So in this case, we had one. William the hippo is our unofficial mascot. And so we go around to different specialists in the building, and we use the blog. And I will say this, if you're going to have a blog, and again, this is true of kids' content or anything else, a blog is a commitment. And we asked kids, what do they think about a blog? One of the things that they can't stand, 7 to 12-year-olds hate when a blog is really outdated. If you only are going to put a post on a blog once every 3 months, don't have a blog, right? Because kids know, they know that that's lame. If you're going to tell them you're going to put up content and it's going to be fresh, it's a commitment, but you do it. So if you commit to a blog, make sure you're up for the task. Some behavior. And this is, I should say, the MetKids site is responsive design, so you can use it on desktop, mobile, and tablet. We are still working on getting our app into the App Store. So this is prior to our app, but for now, what we have are 50% of our visitors are new, and then the others are returning. Almost, not quite, but almost a third of our visitors come 3 times or more, and that makes me really happy. And at the moment, it's desktop, followed by mobile, and at the moment, our visitors are mostly iOS users, iPhone tablets. At the moment, up until these statistics are from early May, and so visitors are coming from, we know they're coming from 157 countries. The countries move around depending on what content we publish. So currently, the top country is the US, Canada, Russia, France, Germany, and we've got English, Russian, Spanish, French. These move around, they do change, and we have recently translated all of the videos into 11 languages, the 11 languages that the Met supports, which are available on YouTube. So they are captioned and they are translated. And here, so for example, if you want to know the story behind the world's oldest piano, it's been translated into 11 languages. So I'm hoping that we start to understand which kids are looking at this from afar. In terms of building community, we have an e-newsletter, we have a blog, as I mentioned, and then we also do use social media. But we don't use social media, obviously, to talk to kids, and we did not create our own handle. We use the Met's main handle, and then we use the hashtag MetKids. And so that's something that was recommended to us by our social group. Don't try to build a whole new following. If you have a museum following, add a hashtag. Then you don't have to build a whole new audience all again. We did not need a separate MetKids handle. I would much rather send out my messages to 1 million people than 2,000 that I'm building a little bit at a time. So take advantage of your institution's strength. For us, Facebook is the top social referral, right? And then our videos go right on the platform. Twitter is good for us for posting fun facts. People like short, digestible pieces of information on Twitter. And we did get a very good review in Common Sense Media, which is an independent organization that reviews children's media, and so that was one of our top referrals. So know who your influencers are. Know who cares in your community about quality children's media, and know what's going on there. And Pinterest, of course, is great. It's image-driven. So this is just an example of one. It also is, it's a way for us to reach out to adults. We are not talking to 7, 8, and 9-year-olds on Twitter, and I hope you're not either. It allows us to reach out to families, but it also is a really good way to cross-pollinate your audience. And some people who think, oh, I'm not interested in kids' things, well, you might find out that that kid, Anouk, asked a really good question of that curator who organized the Pergamon exhibition. So you might not want to stay on that site, but you might learn something really interesting because that kid had a fantastic question. And so here are my 5 takeaways from the MetKids project. The first one is,